Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Okay, welcome everybody to the Must Read Alaska Show. I am your host, John Quick, and if you are tuning in with us right now, you are on Facebook Live with us, which is very exciting. We kind of transformed into this form of media a couple months back, and it's gone really well. We've had some of our videos get 10, 20,000 views, which in the podcast world is a lot of views. And so we want to thank everybody for tuning in today. We also want to thank our sponsor of the show, Charlie Pierce for Governor. He has stepped in and sponsored our show. His campaign has stepped in and sponsored our show. And we are very grateful for that. Because of his sponsorship, we are able to take conservative news through all the nooks and crannies of Alaska. And that's pretty exciting for us. Well, we have got a treat for you today. I have got a special guest, a friend of mine, Jim Minnery, who's the executive director of a couple of different things, which is very exciting. He spearheads faith and politics here in Alaska, and I appreciate that because I think anytime you can insert a little Jesus is a good thing, and we need Jesus in all the nooks and crannies of our lives, and so Jim helps make sure that happens in the political world all over Alaska. And so, Jim, welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, and you're on this segment 5 questions where I ask our guests around 5 questions. Sometimes I go a little longer, which is totally cool, but I'll just give it over to you, Jim. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do here in Alaska, and then we'll jump right into the 5 questions.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, I'm Jim Minnery. I've been here my whole life, born and raised. I was in graduate school at one point for nonprofit management, and I looked up. I was doing a research paper, and I saw a guy named Tom Minnery, and I had never met another Minnery that wasn't related to me. And so I looked the guy up, and it turns out we're second cousins. He was he's from Ohio, but he was currently living in Colorado Springs, and he had worked with Dr. James Dobson at Focus on the Family to start a public policy kind of branch or arm of Focus on the Family. And for those of you that don't know, Focus on the Family really deals with frontline issues regarding family and the intersection of how faith and your relationship with Christ can build and should build your family's foundation. But they hadn't really done public policy work very much until the late 80s, mid 80s. Anyway, after having met with Tom and Dr. Dobson, it turned out that Alaska was one of just a handful of states that didn't have an official family policy council on board. And so I was very excited had done a few things after graduate school with the Red Cross and March of Dimes and Crisis Pregnancy Center, helping to position them in the community to raise money. And then I thought, this one really keeps on coming back to me. So I worked with a guy named Dave Bronson, who many of you might know. He's our current mayor. And we got together because he had actually registered Alaska Family Council as a domain name. And I never heard of the guy. This was in 2006. And so we got together for coffee, and that became the beginning of Alaska Family Council. We've been around since 2006. It's my full-time career in managing the ministry. We have a few staff members, and we're looking to expand. But my passion is to, like you say, in the intersection of faith and politics is what animates me. Politics is breathing to me. It's just something that I'm always thinking about, always have, really. There's no place that God is not on the throne of, including the realm of civil government. And so it's been fascinating and challenging and wonderful over the last 15 years or so to work with individuals who want to get in the mix in terms of people who want to be elected to public office. some of them really don't realize, I think, what they're getting into in terms of, Satan has been given control over this world, and it's obviously a temporary assignment. But he's been given control of this world, and the seat of power is government. So when you go into that arena from a principality's perspective, it's very dark, especially if you're standing for truth and for righteousness and justice based on God's design for human flourishing. And so, that's been one of the challenges, and one of the thrills is to be able to sit down, pray with people that are in that position of public power and say, listen, we're in this together. We know who wins, regardless who wins an election. Today, obviously, is the day a lot of people in Anchorage are waiting to see if we can capture a few seats back in the school board and Anchorage Assembly. We may not, depending on how it goes. But we do know who wins in the end, and that's up to God, and it's certain. And so we just have to we're called to be faithful and diligent in representing truth in the public square. And I've just been blessed to be able to have a lot of people across the state, either on my board or constituents that have been a part of this ministry. And I'm glad to be on the show today, John.
That's awesome. Well, sounds like you have your hands full, and you have quite the task in front of you. I know that you have some exciting things coming up, which we'll talk a little bit later about. But my first question to you is this: you probably gotten to know a lot of political folks over the years. Who is somebody in the political world you look up to, living or dead, and why?
Well, I watched another documentary on Ronald Reagan. I know that's kind of a typical one you hear a lot of, but I was really impressed with this last video I saw. I haven't seen the one with Dennis Quaid. I'm looking forward to that. I think that it's supposed to be a very solid representation of him. But I'd have to say Reagan, just because of his winsomeness, and because of how he really took the concept of being a city on the hill seriously, and especially after the assassination attempt. He the part that I didn't know was that he was actually praying for what's his name, the guy that shot him, Hinckley, as he was being wheeled down the hospital room, not knowing if he was going to survive or not. And to me, that really spoke volumes about really what we're all about as individuals, and in the public realm especially, is to look at others who are opponents, not as enemies, but as image bearers. And I think that Ronald Reagan did that better than most that I've ever seen. And so I guess he'd be my number one dude.
That's awesome. He was a great president, and oftentimes when I ask that question, he comes up a lot. And I think he's been an inspiration to a lot of folks, and I think that the conservatives out there are missing guys like him.
Yes, we are.
As we have Joe Biden as our president now. So,
Yeah.
the next question is this, Jim? What are one or two accomplishments in your life? Could be work, could be not. It's up to you, that you're super proud of, and why?
Wow. I think, first and foremost, that God had the interest in me and sought me out despite myself. And the Hound of Heaven got a hold of me. I'm a fallen sinner like everyone, but that's the most prominent thing. But even prior to that, and that was kind of a gradual process. It wasn't a moment in time. It got intensified after I got involved with the second most important thing to me, which would be my wife. We went to high school together and have been together now since we got married in 1991. And the reality is that she's put up with a whole lot, as I think most wives do. And I'm stumbling forward and trying to just be grateful every day that she allows me to be in the same house with her. Because she's got.
I like to tell everybody that I'm the president of the Married Up Club.
Exactly right. And then in the work environment, and then she's been able to give me 4 amazing kids and 1 granddaughter. And I couldn't be more blessed. The number one thing in life I've realized is passing the baton of faith on to your children. And I know people that haven't had that blessing. At least it hasn't materialized the way they thought. They're still praying, and we're still praying for that kind of thing to happen in some families. But, I have 4 kids that love the Lord. And it's not to say that there's not struggles and there's not challenges, but I mean, that's the greatest gift that you could ever have, is to have assurance that you have salvation with your family. In regards to work, I'd say, there's the standard trophies that you hang on the wall. And for us, it was probably ballot measure 2, which was the parental notification law. And then also the Medicaid funding elective abortion law that was passed and signed into law by Governor Parnell. And both of those, of course, were overthrown by the courts. And so that's one of our biggest challenges in this state, is to push back against a very activist usurpation of power by the Alaska Supreme Court. It's stunning to see it kind of get behind the scenes and see some of the stuff that's happened over the years. I tell people that we're working right now on trying to advance a constitutional convention to get people to say yes. And one of the quotes, I keep on trying to say this as often as I can because it's so intriguing to me, is that they had a consultant's report that was provided in 1955 to the original delegates. And it basically, they wanted to ask the consultants what they thought of the judicial selection process. And the outside consultants basically said, we've never in our lives seen a judicial selection process that gives more power to the Alaska or to the Bar Association than what you're doing here in Alaska. And we highly recommend that something changes. And that consultant's report, although it's listed in Vic Fisher's book on Alaska Constitution, the only surviving member of the original delegation, that full report never made it to the consultants, or to the delegate floor, rather. So people voted on our Constitution without knowledge that there was red flags saying you're going to have problems with this. In fact, one of the conservatives at that time of the delegation said, when he was asked about this, his quote was, "Well, in 10 years we can fix it. I know it's bad, but in 10 years we can fix it." Because we have every 10 years to vote on the convention, and we've never done it. So that my dream is to have another trophy that would be, we pass the constitutional convention question, we get the right people elected as delegates, and we put the court back in its place.
That's awesome. One of the things that I'm excited to chat with you about is this event you have coming up, because it's a big deal, because, you'll get to talk about it here in a second, but just to kind of highlight it, people, nonprofits and folks all over Alaska throw events, and they throw fundraisers, and, they'll get the normal kind of who's who of Alaska speakers to come speak, right? But you got Dennis Prager, which is like a huge deal. Dennis Prager to conservatives is, like a mini god. And he is a guy has an enormous platform, and he is coming to Alaska, which is huge for us. And your event was so popular, it turns out you got to do 2 events. So talk to me a little bit about how this event kind of came together, and what are some of your hopes of accomplishments for this event?
Wow. Yeah, you're right. It's one of those things where I think affable is the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Dennis Prager, just because he's like a grandpa or a good friend or an uncle that you just really are attracted to because of how kind they are and funny. And, he's just always, not that he's naively optimistic, but he has just such a good spirit. And so, yeah, we were very blessed to be able to reach out to him and his wife, Susan, and arrange for this. He told me that, the only reason I'm able to fit this in is because Susan told me that she wanted to come to Alaska, Jim. So you didn't know that. So my goal is to take good care of her when she's up, or them. And we're trying to figure that out right now in terms of what kind of activities they're going to be involved in up here, in addition to helping us. And so Yeah, we were sold out quicker than we ever have been at the Captain Cook. That was amazing. And what was interesting was that a lot of the folks that we normally had, because we've been doing this for a long time, and we recognized all the people generally that would come to our events, and especially people who sponsored tables. But this particular speaker attracted people outside of our normal wheelhouse. And so we got quite a few tables that were purchased by people we'd never heard of. And it turns out they're the folks in the Jewish community. And not necessarily all of them, I would say most are in the conservative Jewish arena, but there's also liberal Jews that love Dennis Prager. And there's people outside of the faith that love Dennis Prager, just because he brings a sense of calm and civility to the table. I mean, PragerU has I believe over 5 billion views. All of his videos. I mean, it's stunning to see how hard the left tries to cancel him, and then how that does nothing but just increase his platform in terms of how more people are feeding off of it and hungry. And it's a global thing to see how he has really spread the message of freedom and liberty and intellectual curiosity. That's the thing that really is so fascinating to me, is that he doesn't do it really in a vitriolic or political way even necessarily, but he just does it from what is right. And how do we come to those decisions as to determine what's right? And, he's more about, he always says that he's more about clarity than he is about winning an argument necessarily. Let's just make sure that we have clarity. And that's what's so damaging about the cancel culture, is that they don't want to have other sides presented, and that causes it's the difference that he always describes between a leftist and a liberal. Liberals, the classical liberals, want to have good, healthy discussion, and they may disagree, but the leftists that are taking on or have taken over are now in this Marxist mentality that we have to
demand conformity.
We have to demand conformity, and we have to eliminate. It's what we're seeing right now in Russia in terms of the fake news that's over there, that that's divided the whole half the country, that is being fed the lies that Putin is delivering, and then the other half that's saying this is absolute insanity. And so it's on display in full color right now. But Prager is going to be. We were able to get him to another event, you're right, at Anchorage Baptist Temple on Sunday. So the event at the Captain Cook Hotel is going to be is sold out. And then that's on Saturday, May 21st. And then we're able to get him to come to another event, because we had just such a high demand of people let down. I kept on saying, oh, no, really, looks like we're going to get sold out. And we did. And so we were just so blessed to be able to have Dennis and Susan say, sure, we'll do another event. So it'll be at ABT. It's not going to be a full dinner. It's just going to be a lecture. We're working with him now on what that might be in terms of the content. But yeah, that's going to be on Sunday, May 22nd at 4 to 6 p.m. And that I'm hopeful that it'll get sold out as well, just because it's a real treat for Alaskans.
Yep. So if you're listening, folks, I got Jim Minnery with me, and he has just shared with us that Dennis Prager is going to do a second event, which is very exciting, at ABT Sunday, May 22nd from 4 to 6. And if folks are interested in going, where do they go to buy a ticket? How do they do that?
Well, we're literally right in the process of working with our designers and stuff, because this happened fairly quickly. And you can go to akfamily.org. I've sent out an action alert to the link for people to buy tickets, and people are already doing that in droves. But we're refining the site from what it was at Captain Cook. So anyway, it's not quite ready yet, but it will be by the end of today. When people go to akfamily.org, just check back at the end of the day or tomorrow, and we'll have a slider that comes up immediately, and it'll give you a link to the site to buy tickets.
So last question is this, Jim. Why do you think it's important that faith play a role in politics?
I think faith should be a part of everything. Politics is nothing more than just a way of communicating ideas, and we have the best ideas in terms of true human flourishing. The Bible has something to say about every single topic, And it's fascinating. One of my favorite books, I haven't read the whole thing, but Dr. Wayne Grudem wrote a book called Politics According to the Bible, and he dives into, as other people have, but it's fascinating to see what Scripture has to say about everything from immigration to taxes to relationships with family, and how the government can be engaged and should be engaged. So it's this massive misunderstanding, I believe, that was, I think, maybe advanced by Satan himself in terms of the letter to Danbury Church that Thomas Jefferson wrote regarding separation of church and state, and what that really meant, and how people interpret it now. But it's been a journey for 15 years, and will continue to be, to talk to pastors and people of faith to realize why they need to be salt and light in that arena. And you don't have to look very far to realize the way I look at, and John MacArthur, one of my other heroes. He's not political, but he's a pastor down in California and president of Masters College. Has said that Romans 1 talks about this three-step process that God lays out. And the first one is the fornication and the sexual revolution. So that's happened obviously in the 60s. And then homosexuality is the next thing that is discussed in Romans 1, which has to do with, turning your desires over to same-sex attraction. And that's obviously been in the last 20 years, really, that it's just, unbelievable, how our society has embraced that, including corporate America and everything else. In Hollywood, well, the final thing is a depraved mind. And so I believe, and as does John MacArthur, that we're seeing that right now in terms of God turning the entire culture over to a mind that says, I don't know what a woman is. I don't know what a human is. I don't know what true human flourishing is. I don't know the difference between a man and a woman. You can choose among 78 genders now in the Anchorage School District, and they're hiding that information from parents. I think we're at a stage right now where it's exciting because Scripture is being fulfilled before our eyes. And people have talked about this forever. It's just really the time and the moment where our generation sees the second coming. I don't know that, but I do know that we're as depraved as we've ever been. And it's being embraced by Hollywood. It's being embraced by academia, and we have an opportunity to stand. And that's a blessing, and it's a responsibility, and it's a privilege.
Well, thanks so much, Jim. I really appreciate you coming on the Must Read Alaska show. For those of you just tuning in, we have Jim Minnery here. He's the executive director of Alaska Family Council. He runs the show over there. And then for folks that have asked me, what does Alaska Family Council do? What's a simple 2-sentence thing that you could give somebody, Jim? What do you say you do?
We stand in the gap of the culture in the public marketplace to advance ideas of biblical flourishing.
That's awesome.
That's probably the best way to put it.
That's great. Well, thanks everybody for tuning into the Must Read Alaska show. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining us and being on our segment 5 Questions. We really appreciate it. We also want to thank our show sponsor, Charlie Pierce for Governor. We love that guy. Thanks so much, Charlie Pierce for Governor, for sponsoring our show and making sure that conservative news is heard in all of the nooks and crannies of Alaska. If you want, you can also join us on Fridays at probably 8 or 9 a.m. James tends to switch it up a bit, but we do have a show Friday mornings. James Baisden is our host, and Suzanne and I will be back on Monday morning as well. So until then, from somewhere in Alaska, I'm John Quick, and I'm signing off. Thanks so much.
Take care.